Welcome to the Kingston and Islands federal election debate. My name is Jonathan Rose. I teach in the Department of Politics at Queen's University, and I'll be moderating tonight's debate, hosted by Your TV Kingston as part of their Your Vote initiative. Before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. And I wanted to recognize this because it's to say that there were people long before Western settlers have arrived. Tonight's debate is sponsored by the Kingston Action Group for Basic Income Guarantee, an organization that is interested in alleviating poverty. The theme of tonight's debate is Canada after the pandemic. And given the sponsor, we want to ask the candidates how their party will respond to income inequality and the growing gap between the rich and the poor, something that's been made more acute over the last couple of years. So here's the format. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement, the order of which was decided by random lot prior to the taping. And this will be followed by questions on a wide range of policy issues where candidates will have 2 minutes, followed by an open session of about 5 minutes, where I'm hoping that candidates can gently and respectfully contrast their party's position with others. So let me introduce you to the candidates. For the Liberal Party of Canada, Mark Gerretsen. I don't know if the camera's on him. For the New Democratic Party of Canada, Vic Sahai. For the Conservative Party of Canada, Gary Oosterhoff. For the Green Party of Canada, Wajid Khan. And for the People's Party of Canada, Shelley Sale Udall. Okay, thanks very much. So let me go to Mark with the first 2-minute intro. Mark, the Liberals have only recently made their platform public. What does this say about the party's interest and need for an election?
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, and good evening to my fellow candidates and to folks that are watching us. I'll start by saying that the last year and a half has definitely been hard. I've heard from seniors who have been missing loved ones that they've been unable to see. I've heard from children who miss going to school and seeing friends. I heard from businesses that are struggling to stay afloat. And I will say that I'm extremely proud of our government's approach over the last year and a half. I think that it's fair to say that we were there to make sure that we had everybody's back throughout the process. And I'm more importantly extremely proud of the response from our local community and the way that people have responded to this pandemic. It has been nothing short of inspirational. But I will also say that I believe brighter days are ahead. More and more people are being vaccinated every day. Our jobs are being recovered. Our economy is growing. And I feel that we have a great opportunity now to ensure that we come back stronger than before, that we focus on climate action that as a main priority, that we invest in affordable housing and housing affordability, and that we invest in local infrastructure projects right here in the Kingston area. So thank you for the introduction, Jonathan, and I look forward to the discussion with my fellow candidates this evening.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. And on your right is the New Democratic Party candidate, Vic Sahai. So Vic, I understand you're a health scientist and a researcher. What assurances would you be able to give voters that you're able to represent business interests in the community?
Absolutely. So thank you for that question. I think I've been going door to door, and many people have known me as a public health scientist, a passionate environmentalist, and a social activist. Many small businesses have borne the brunt of this pandemic, while corporations have made billions of dollars. The CERB have offered financial security for millions, and it has shown that a guaranteed income program for citizens is possible, especially supporting small businesses. As part of a just recovery, an NDP government will invest in a guaranteed livable income, which will create a floor under everyone, including small business owners. It has been shown that this program will pay for itself by cutting red tape and in saving billion of dollars in healthcare. A just recovery must also include a national childcare program, pharmacare program, and affordable housing for all, which will benefit small businesses. So how are we going to support small businesses? Well, let's do it this way. What we're going to do is to close tax loopholes so that companies like Amazon, for example, who paid 0 taxes in 2019, will pay their fair share. How is it fair that small businesses are paying up to 30% in taxes, yet Amazon is paying 0 in taxes? The other thing we want to do is to make sure that we can pay for our programs.
And Vic, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off there. You're
All
at
right.
2 minutes. But
Excellent.
maybe we'll get into the rest of that through tonight's debate. Thank you very much. So beside Vic is the Conservative candidate, Gary Oosterhoff. And Gary, you're well known in the city as a councillor, a city councillor, and you represent a rural district on city council. Why should voters in the city, in downtown Kingston, think that you can represent their interest?
Thank you very much. That's a great question. And I think that being a councillor for the city of Kingston and representing the countryside has given me a very uniquely prepared me for the task of representing, being a candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada, and also to serve the city of Kingston. Having been a councillor and being a councillor has given me a great opportunity to be focused on city issues, serving on Economic Development Board, being a contractor in the city for all these years, and sitting on the Housing Board, and all of that has uniquely placed me at this time. And so I just want to say too, to thank you for inviting me to here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Tonight is a good opportunity to speak to you and to bring a message of hope and possibilities for a safe and a secure future for all Canadians. Tonight I am proud to bring forward a plan to lift up working Canadians and working families, as well as doubling our support for disabled workers. Tonight I bring a plan by Canada's Conservatives to lower the cost of living for all families. As well, we have a plan to tackle the high cost of home ownership and rental, and making it possible to own or rent a home for the first time. And finally, Canada's Conservatives have a solid plan to support seniors and find solutions for long-term care living. When we think and debate on topics like we are tonight, we need to think differently. We also need to think responsibly. There is a way that we can do this together. A rising tide lifts all ships, and Canada's conservative government, we plan to accomplish this. The good news is that we can do it, and we can project and commit to a balanced budget in 10 years through responsible spending and monetary planning, and also meeting all our social responsibilities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Gary. The Green candidate is Wajid Khan. Wajid, what would a Green Member of Parliament do in the House of Commons when it may not have enough seats for party standing? What would you tell Kingstonians who want to vote for you?
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I'd have to say Rome wasn't built in a day. Hi, my name is Dr. Wajid Khan. I'm a dentist in Kingston, Ontario. I decided to run for office because I became increasingly concerned about the conduct of the current Liberal government. As a retired regular forces officer in Her Majesty's Loyal Canadian Forces, I felt it was my duty to step aside from my career and serve my country and run for office. So Jonathan, when you invited us here today, you asked us, what will Canada look like in a post-COVID-19 pandemic world from an economic, healthcare, social, cultural, and environmental perspective? First of all, environment. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted many of the inequalities that exist within our society. When the Prime Minister announced on March 13, 2020 that the country was going to be shut down, he said we're all going to be in this together. And we were all in this together. However, we weren't all on the same types of ships. If we were at sea with a storm, when the COVID-19 storm rolled in, some people were in canoes and others were in $1 million yachts. And when those 8-foot COVID-19 waves came and hit those ships, the people in the canoes were afflicted much differently than the people in the yachts. And the CERB program only highlighted that these inequalities exist in our society and no long-term solutions were found. What the Green Party intends to do is create good green jobs that are all-inclusive and made in Canada. From the healthcare perspective, we believe that healthcare should be full scope and respect the aspects of the Canada Health Act. From a social perspective, we need to ensure that we address the emergency situation we have right now in Canada and deal with affordable housing and the cost of living. From the cultural perspective, we buried the history of the First Nations people in this country. We need the real truth for reconciliation. And with respect to the environment, Jonathan, there is no party better than the Green Party with a platform to address the environment. Thank you, Jonathan.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks for touching on those issues, many of which we will return to, I'm sure, later in the debate. Our final candidate tonight is Shelley Sale-Udall. Welcome, Shelley. You've said, in fact, on this station, that your passion in politics is about mental health and children, and that you pride yourself on being inclusive. Can you tell us how you would advance those issues in the People's Party?
Hi, thanks for including me. Yes, I said I'm passionate about children. I'm also passionate about functional health, well-being, and some other issues. But in terms of moving that forward with children, I think I do a pretty good job right now. I love kids, and as we stand here, we have a lot of things going on in our country as I look at my other candidates who are actually really wonderful people. I think you all know that I think that of you. But I think we're at an inflection point right now, and this is not the Canada that I want for my children or your children or anybody else's children. And there's a lot of things that we can do to support our kids. Our kids have gone through a children's mental health crisis. I think there's 12 pediatric organizations, including CHEO and Toronto Sick Kids, that had talked about the harms of lockdowns and masking that have happened to children in our area. I know I even have children messaging me and coming to visit with me and say, help us. And every day I have more and more people. How would I do that? I don't know, we'll have to see, because right now we don't have a budget, and I think Canadians are almost very poor, but I do have some great ideas on how we can reconnect and help children thrive.
Excellent. Thanks very much. So I appreciate all the candidates drawing those really clear lines between their policies, and what we'll hope to do over the next 90 minutes is really tease those differences out, and I heard some pretty clear distinctions. And let's start with the first and perhaps the most important issue on the minds of Canadians, and that is tax fairness. So as you know, the deficit has ballooned under the pandemic. Based on the government's fiscal update, the deficit will be $1.4 trillion, that's with a T, dollars, trillion dollars. That's 55% of our gross domestic product. Many would say that this level of spending was warranted given the pandemic, but that maybe we need to rethink things post-pandemic. So my question to the candidates, and we'll start with Vic Sahai of the NDP, is what is your party's position on spending? Is it time for some austerity, or should we continue to expand public expenditures? Vic?
I think there's two parts to that question. There is the expenditure part, but there's also how do you get the money to invest in social programs. What we, the NDP, have said that we're going to do is to put 1% tax, wealth tax, on people earning over $10 million, that's worth $10 million. We're also going to put a 15% excess tax on those corporations that earned billions of dollars because of this pandemic. The other thing that we're going to look at is really a fair taxation system. So if you look at industry that pay zero taxes, such as the Walmarts of the world, the Amazons of the world, Yet other businesses who are middle-sized and small are paying up to 30% in taxes. How is that fair? So what we are going to do as the NDP, we will close those tax loopholes. So businesses like Amazon, Walmart, will have to pay their fair share of taxes. It is only fair. And that is how we are going to make the tax system a better, fairer, just tax system. Are we going to spend on social determinants of health? As an epidemiologist, I know that being socially, economically disadvantaged and of color, people who are indigenous, for example, are more likely to have a lower health status than those who are rich. And the only way to make sure that we have an equitable and just society is to look at redistribution of wealth from the very wealthy to the rest of Canadians.
Great. Thank you very much. Gary, how would you answer that question?
Thanks, Jonathan. Tonight, I don't have a solution to our taxes or where we're going to go with that, being 2.5 weeks in as a candidate. But I can tell you the exciting news is that under a Conservative government, we are going to have an opportunity to rebuild Canada and have a recovery plan. And when we have a strong economy, then we have everything working. It's like a well-greased engine, and then our taxes can be paid, and we have what we need to have a safe and secure country. And so our first goal will be to securing our jobs, and by recovering 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic within 1 year. We're also going to secure our accountability by enacting a new anti-corruption law to clean up the mess in Ottawa. We're going to secure our mental health through our Canada Mental Health Action Plan. We're going to secure the country by creating a strategic stockpile of essential products and building the capacity to manufacture vaccines here at home. And we're going to secure our economy, which is really the driving force to pay for all our taxes that we need to recover from the incredible debt that we are now under. And we will have a balanced budget over the next decade. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Waji, over to you.
So, with respect to anytime you start talking about taxation and you're talking about government expenditure, the one thing you have to ask yourself is that you can't spend more money than you're bringing in. So you can do one of two choices. You can either bring more money in, or you can look at your expenses. So first of all, let's just focus on expenses. The current government spent $4.5 billion buying a pipeline. We don't need Canadians to be writing blank checks to inefficient organizations. The second thing we want to look at is perhaps what we can do from the income perspective. I don't think Canadians need more taxes. Our party doesn't believe Canadians need more taxes. A green a carbon pricing, as the Liberals like to call it, or a carbon tax, isn't necessarily going to change consumer behaviors. People don't need more taxation. In terms of my NDP colleagues stating going after the top 1%, we need to invest in infrastructure. How many Canada Revenue Agency investigations into tax evasion were abandoned just because they were too complicated? I agree, we do need to tax those who are making money in our country, those companies like Facebook, Amazon, Uber, that are not actually contributing to the well-being but benefiting from the strong, stable economy which we do have. And lastly, by creating good, green, made-in-Canada jobs that are culturally inclusive and involve everyone, we can create high-paying jobs in our country, we can make more things in our country, increase our GDP. If we tax those other companies, as my colleague from the NDP has stated, you'll find that there'll be more parity with respect to the prices which are charged in the economy, and that is a great way to have a plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Shelley, over to you.
To be honest, the People's Party of Canada, we have a platform, and for those who are interested in it, they're welcome to go to our website. I think I'm a little bit more concerned about sort of the here and now, and what we're going to do to get our country back to a different place. This is not the Canada that any of us have been growing up in. And I think for me, present focused, we have a lot of things that I think we should be talking about right now. So I'm going to pass on that. And at some point in time, I'd like to come back to this if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Jonathan. I guess first I'd start by saying that, yes, we took on a lot of debt. We had to. People were looking for supports. But Canada has one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the G7 countries. We're in a good position to come back out of this. And I would also say that we are in a position that many of our allied countries are in. The second thing I'd say is that what's critical now, and what we learned during the pandemic, is that it's important to invest in Canadians. This government invested in Canadians. It's the reason why 92% of the jobs have already been recovered in Canada. When you compare that to the US, where only 75% of the jobs have been recovered. And the third thing I'd say is that unlike the NDP, who are looking to tax people who are, $1 million or $2 million, we just announced in our platform yesterday that if you make $222,000 or more, the tax bracket will be increased for people who fall within that. We recognize that a strong economy is dependent on a strong middle class, and it's absolutely critical to have that. But one of the things that I found really interesting that I just heard Waji mention, Jonathan, I know you want to go around a bit, is that he was critical of the carbon tax. Well, this is something that the Green Party supported all the way along. World-renowned economists have said that putting a price on pollution is a way to curb market behavior. And I'm curious if this is, the Green Party's position here, at least locally, that they want to do away with the price on pollution, the carbon tax. It's a critical tool to making sure that we can curb emissions by encouraging people, encouraging businesses, encouraging manufacturers to reduce their emissions in order to see incentives from that. So, I do find it troubling that would be the case, because I think that it merits a great discussion to be had on that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. We've heard from all the candidates, so let me open it up. Vic, I see you're champing at the bit there, so why don't I turn it to you?
We know that there's going to be a need for economic stimulus. If you talk to the Conservatives, for example, they're going to give tax breaks to the very wealthy. And, that is a failed economic theory of trickle-down economics. If you talk to the Liberals, they'll give tax breaks to their corporate friends, right? And one of the things that I'm going to ask Mark is that, every time there's an election, you seem to react from the left, but then you govern from the right. Why is this?
Can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I disagree completely. Look at my position on the Liberal Party or the Government of Canada purchasing a pipeline. I voted against our government on that issue. Look at when it comes to basic income guarantee. I seconded a private member's motion, Bill C-273, to study and to develop a strategy for Canada on that. I routinely am a critical voice of my own government when I see the time is necessary. The reality is that I believe that I've done a good job of representing the majority of people in our community in the way that they would like to see their member of parliament to work in Ottawa.
So could I respond to that, please?
Sure.
Okay.
Quickly, because I
So,
want to
Mark,
get the other
you
candidates
voted
involved as well.
against a guaranteed livable income. You actually voted against it.
No, I didn't. What
You did.
What you're referring to, yeah, what happened was the NDP, in one of their opposition motions, Jonathan, what they did is they brought in an opposition motion that consisted of about 7 or 8 lines, 2 paragraphs that basically said, we will bring universal basic income into Canada, full stop. Well, without developing a strategy or knowing how it's going to happen, that's completely irresponsible. The reality is that what needs to happen is we need to have the proper data. A program like universal basic income is so large and has so many variables in it that if you just get 1 or 2 of the variables off, it's going to cost billions of dollars. It's important to make sure that you get it right, that we have a made in Canada solution. It's the reason why I'm a seconder to Bill 273. It's a reason why I supported PEI's request to do a pilot project on universal basic income. But I certainly, although the NDP enjoy their opposition day motions of trying to dangle a carrot in order to be able to create scenarios exactly like this, you know, that's
so
not
this-
the
Let me
reality of it.
So
enlarge
this
the
is-
debate here. Waji, why don't you jump in here?
So what the Liberal representative here basically is telling us is, like everything with the Liberal Party, promises that get made are so complicated that as opposed to being able to offer you a solution in 2022, like guaranteed living income, basic livable income, they're going to get caught up in committee for years and years and years. You guys had 6 years to provide solutions to Canadians, but more importantly, let me address your comment about carbon taxation. You were calling it carbon pricing before, and I'm glad that you can finally call it carbon taxation. Taxation, you said, is a means by which to address things. Well, do we know about modifying behaviors? Well, we tax cigarettes out the yin-yang. Has taxation of cigarettes altered behaviors? As a doctor, I see it every day. I talk to patients, I counsel them, I ask them not to smoke. Similarly, people still need to heat their homes. We live in a cold environment. We already tax fossil fuels. We don't tax essential items, but we tax the heating of your home. So are you telling me all of a sudden that people should be punished for wanting to heat their homes? And we're sitting here talking about addressing issues related to affordable housing and cost of living. How is this supposed to do anything? So our comment here is that as opposed to looking at carbon taxation, there are far better ways to address the climate emergency in this country by creating green jobs that are made in Canada that work for Canadians.
Those are great. That's a great line, Waji. I've heard that many times, but it's always been from Conservatives, never from the Green Party. The Green Party in the House of Commons has always been supportive of taxing pollution because they realize that it's an opportunity to curb market behavior. But the reason why we never wanted to call it a carbon tax, even though in the public it's been like that, is because all the money gets returned to people. When you file your income tax, you check a box for the carbon action incentive rebate, you get that money back. It was never intended to be a revenue source. It was intended to be a tool to curb and to change market behavior.
So before we move on to this, and this is great, we're going to come back to these themes
Sorry,
in the next session. But I just wanted to turn it over to Shelley. If you had the last word on this, you've got about 30 seconds.
My last word, 30 seconds. I was going to offer it to you, Vic.
Oh, excellent. So Mark, you said you voted against a pipeline. Now what happened if the whip came to you and said, Mark, you can't do that? What would you do?
Well, my whip doesn't do that.
Are you kidding?
My whip didn't do that. As a matter of fact,
If
Vic, if you go back and look,
if your vote
if you go back and look
matters.
at the number of times that Liberals have voted unanimously the same way versus the number of times the NDP have, the NDP always vote in a block. Always. It's almost,
Mike,
it's very rare that they don't. But I mean, what you're asking me a hypothetical is, you're saying, what if he had told you not to? Well, he didn't tell me not to vote for it. They told me I could vote how I wanted because our Prime Minister said there will only be certain circumstances under which you have to vote a certain way as it relates to a confidence motion, as it relates to a woman's right to choose, and as it relates to...
So your party voted for a pipeline that, if you listen to their rhetoric, will be redundant in 8 years. Why is your government spending billions of dollars in an infrastructure if your party, if you believe the rhetoric?
Their rationale, although I didn't support it, but their rationale was, we're sending all this oil along a train track right now, and it's safer to bring it along a pipeline instead. My own personal view on it is what we should be doing is moving as quickly as we can away from fossil fuels. That's why I voted against it, although I appreciate it. But I will say, Vic, the former leader of the NDP, Tom Mulcair, said in 2020 that, quote, Mr. Trudeau had a climate plan last week that was absolutely marvelous, end quote. Even the NDP and Waji, the former Green leader of the BC party, said the climate plan he recently developed and introduced is bold and thoughtful. You know, these are from the NDP and the Greens, and they're talking about.
I'm sorry, but
Okay, gentlemen, we're gonna have to.
I think Mulcair is actually a Liberal senator now. Isn't
We're going to have to move on, but it's great that there's so much passion in the room. But I want to remind folks I want to remind folks to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity.
This was my sign to you guys. I was like, is this what we're going to be dealing with? Thanks very much for livening it up.
Let's get ready to rumble. Come on.
Yeah, let's do this.
Many of the themes we just talked about really spill over to really one of the core issues of the sponsor of tonight's debate, the Kingston Action Group for Basic Income Guarantee, and that is an income security. And as I mentioned, we are interested in your thoughts around income security, including a basic income guarantee. One of the things the CERB has reminded us is how Canadians are food insecure and how their housing situation is tenuous. And some kind of regular support of income might be warranted, or is it? So perhaps, and I'll start with you, Gary, perhaps you could tell us whether the government ought to have not just an emergency policy, but an everyday policy around income insecurity.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's good to be part of the conversation. I do want to just go back a little bit to not being in that conversation earlier, and I think it's important to say that the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens are all part of the same problem. We can't afford more of the same. Only Conservatives will secure Canada's future. And if we are worried about more debt, more unemployment, and more of the same, there's only one choice to secure the future, and that is with Canada's Conservatives. When it comes to universal basic income, I have to admit in my early view of this is catching me, and I've done some research on it and I studied it. I admit I have a lot to learn on this topic. I do want to know more, and I understand better along the way tonight, and I am listening. I have researched the material for tonight and quickly recognized the difficulties we have in implementing this system, this plan. It will come as no surprise that Canada's Conservatives will not be adopting this concept. The recklessness of our present government over the past months has truly impacted any possible serious consideration of a UBI program. Even the implementation of the CERB plan has shown serious negative effects that even cause businesses to struggle. The challenge to UBI and related federal and provincial jurisdictions has not been addressed. And true to form, the Liberals don't engage with stakeholders and have absolutely no idea where to go with such a plan. Their own heavy regulatory burdens have also complicated matters. Policy shift for this government is simply too much to ask. And as we've heard, the Canada Health Act doesn't change easily either. As the Liberals have spent the bank and creditors are always watching and waiting, the titanic topics of universal basic income and pharmacare and childcare altogether have made the sum of the parts impossible. So tonight it makes sense to look at the possible, and Canada's Conservatives have done just that.
Great, thank you very much. Wajid?
Sorry, could you repeat the question for me?
So I guess I'm interested in what your party's position is around income security guarantee. CERB demonstrated that it was needed as an emergency policy. Do you think we need a regular, everyday policy around income security?
Thank you, Jonathan. I just wanted to make sure I was specific in the answer and not like a politician dancing around it, right? So basically, with respect to a guaranteed living income or a guaranteeing basic income, the sponsor is the Kingston Action Group for the Basic Income Guarantee in Kingston. I think one of the things people confuse is the CERB is not basic income. The purpose of definition of basic income, if you want to think of it this way, as an army soldier, we never leave soldiers behind. Canada is too important to fail. We can't leave Canadians behind. And by any Canadians, I mean any Canadian. Think of basic income as a floor by which if you're a trapeze artist, you have a net underneath you to catch you if you fall. And that's what basic income's there for. It's there to catch people, to make sure bad things don't happen. People wonder, how are we going to pay for this? Well, you no longer have to pay for welfare, you're no longer paying for disability, old age security, child care benefits, and all these other sorts of programs. All the redundant stuff that doesn't contribute towards our GDP is thrown away. And people are given more money in their pockets to make better choices for themselves. I got a question for you, Jonathan. What is this, right? I'll tell you what this isn't. This isn't breakfast, okay? This isn't breakfast, but many Canadians take things like this and send their kids off to school thinking that this is breakfast because either they can't afford better food for them or they don't have the knowledge and education to understand that they can make healthier choices for themselves. So guaranteed living income is part of giving people the financial resources they need to make better choices. But the Green Party is also committed to educating people to take better care of themselves, make healthier choices, less obesity, less cardiovascular disease, less diabetes. All of these things lead to less taxation on our healthcare system, and that's how we pay for these sorts of things. Thank you, Jonathan.
Great, thank you very much. Shelley?
Thanks very much, Waji. That's awesome because I'm on the same plane as he is. When it comes to income security, I know where I was eating dinner tonight before coming here, the restaurant that I ate at couldn't even find people to work, and that's something I've been hearing more often. given the current state of affair, lots of people, and yeah, CERB was necessary because our government locked everybody in, and so in order to live and buy food for their family, they needed some sort of income. And many people said that they made a lot more money on CERB than they did working. And what I'm hearing now from business owners, they can't even find people to work because they're still relying on some of these basic income supports. And I don't know about anybody else, but when we're out working, we feel productive. And we feel when we are contributing members to our community, it also improves our mental health. So on top of what Wadji said too, and again, you know, these healthier choices and things like that, that people do need education. And you know what, I think I'm not big for taking money from people. Every single job and every single volunteer job I've worked for, we don't have money. And I have a lot of pretty creative ideas on things that we can do to stimulate our economy in Kingston. I know we're talking about Canada, but Maxime's talking about Canada for my party. I'd prefer to talk about here in Kingston and what's going on here. And I think there's a lot of things we can do without taking money from taxpayers because we're already broke.
Great. Thank you very much. Mark.
Yeah, just back to Gary's comment that Liberals spent the bank. I would like to remind him that every single member of Parliament, through unanimous consent motions, without debate, voted in favor of all of the money that was spent during the pandemic. With the exception of the budget in June of this year, the Conservatives voted in favor of all of it. And I know that now they like to say, well, you guys spent it, but they voted in favor of it every single step of the way. Going to universal basic income. You know, this is a tricky program to, I've already highlighted some of the issues with it, Jonathan, but I think what we also have to respect, and what I think that the NDP unfortunately neglects quite a bit, is that the distribution of social programs is not only within the federal purview. As a matter of fact, more of it is within the province. So unless there's a way to work with provinces to make it work, then it'll never happen. You'll recall that the NDP, through another similar motion to the one that Vic brought up earlier, tried to bring in childcare for everybody. Well, it doesn't work that way. We need to actually go out and work with the provinces. So one by one, you've been hearing of provinces that have been coming on board with the Liberal Party's plan for childcare, $10 a day childcare. And so it's the same idea with universal basic income. We need to work with the provincial partners because, quite frankly, they're spending a lot of the money. They want to have a say in it too. We have to work with the provinces and territories to make programs like this work.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Vic.
So, as you said, CERB offered financial security for millions and showed that a livable income for all is possible, right? As part of the Just Recovery, we will invest with the province, with our Indigenous partners, with our territories. We will invest in a guaranteed livable income to create a floor where everybody will have a solid foundation. This will reduce poverty and it will reduce homelessness. But as an epidemiologist, I can tell you right now that when they did studies, they have shown, for example, in Winnipeg, they showed an 8% decrease in hospitalization. And when Mark says, well, oh, you know, it's a provincial issue, so is healthcare, so is childcare. But we can work with the province if we have the inkling to do so, Mark.
Can I respond to that?
Oh, you still got to.
No, I'm still going. Right. So one of the things that I just want to talk a little bit about too is that everybody thinks that this is a handout. It isn't a handout, it is an investment. If we invest in decreasing homelessness, if we invest in decreasing poverty, it is the very, thank you, it is the very essence of public health. Prevention is the best. If we prevent somebody from a heart attack, then we don't have to spend millions of dollars in hospital care, right? So to say that for Mark, for Gary to say that, you know what, this is too much of a taxation burden, this is an investment, guys.
Okay, with that, that's great. I know, Mark, you wanted to jump in, so let's
Well,
open the
I
floor.
just wanted to say that in the same breath, Vic said, we're going to do this with the provinces. And then about 3 sentences later, he said, we will try to work with the provinces. Well, see, this is the problem that I routinely see with the NDP in the House of Commons, is they say they're going to do something. You say you're going to bring in childcare. You say you will bring in universal basic income, but you don't know that because you haven't talked to the provinces yet. And this is my whole point, is that the responsible way to do it, like we're doing with childcare in the program that we have, is to signal our intentions to work with the provinces and then go out and try to develop and form strategies with them, rather than trying to carte blanche say at the beginning, yeah, it's going to happen, because you have no way of guaranteeing it's going to happen. Our Constitution doesn't allow for it. We have separation of jurisdictional powers and responsibilities between different levels of government, and as a result, they have to be respected. And what you're basically saying is, we'll do away with all that, and we'll tell the provinces that we're going to do this.
No,
It
we
just
will
doesn't
work
work
with
that way.
Sorry.
Stuff sitting at committees forever either. I mean, basically, people need solutions, and they need solutions now. You've had 6 years to produce programs, and you can't blame COVID, and you can't sit there and say COVID. We didn't know about this. You had SARS in 2003. You guys have known about this, okay? What I find odd is the Liberal representative here is telling the Conservatives they forgot to vote for something. I forgot. The Conservatives didn't vote for this election either. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. None of us voted for this election.
Me neither.
No confidence
you
motion was
stand
brought
up to
into
your
the
boss?
House. We're just
Yeah.
being asked to sit. What's that?
That is a very
I
good
just
question.
said, how do you
I'm
have a
happy to answer
backbone
that.
against
The reality of the
person- yeah.
situation, Shelley, is that the federal government just spent a lot of money on programs that you were just very critical of a few moments
Call
ago.
a
A
confidence
lot of
motion.
money on programs to support Canadians. I witnessed in the House of Commons myself between January and June Conservatives trying to prevent meaningful, important legislation,
What
like
legislation?
banning conversion therapy for one, getting to setting net zero targets. Those are two great examples of stuff that they just filibustered all along. So I think that the Prime Minister just got to the point where he said, you know what?
But he's been
I've
handing
tried to
money
work with Parliament.
everywhere.
Parliament's not working. We've
let's
spent
just
$1 trillion.
go and ask
Maybe
for a
it's
writ.
time
Let's
now
ask
for
the
people to be
let's
able to
ask-
weigh in
So-
and to cast their ballots.
Let's ask
Okay,
the
so-
MPs to vote on it.
So
Let's ask the MPs to vote on it. It was a very easy procedure.
To vote on what?
They have mock parliaments in grade 6. You recall the House and say, you know what, guys, I'm feeling an election. I think A, the House is no longer orderly. B, that people are that we need to go to the people and ask the people, how do the other parties feel about it? There's lots of governments that operate very similar to our minority parliament that we have here in Canada. The problem we're seeing right now, knocking door to door, and I'm looking at my other colleagues here, I feel bad knocking on people's doors because I myself was getting ready with my family to finally go and visit our grandparents and go and do activities and events, kids playing soccer in the field and stuff like that. Literally, you go to a baseball game on July 30th of this year and finally
You're
go
not
to
allowed,
a Blue Jays game. But within 2 weeks of people getting a freedom, right now we're hitting beating drums of a Mu variant, a Delta variant. There might be an October lockdown. Today's modeling in Ontario says that 9,000 cases by October. People didn't want an election at this point in time.
Raji,
and irrespective of the
Raji,
arguments,
you've been chomping at the
irrespective of
bit
the
to run in
arguments
an
about
election for the
Parliament,
last
okay,
6
fine.
months.
So-
First you were a
Okay, you're
Conservative
saying it's being
candidate, then you were a
dysfunctional.
Green Party candidate. You keep switching parties.
No.
You've been chomping at the bit to run in an
Because
election.
I was ashamed, Mark, of being a Liberal. I was disgraced about the fact that I raised money to put Trudeau into power. I was so disgraced about the lies that we had told the people as an honorable, retired officer in Her Majesty's Loyal Canadian Forces. I had no ability to look myself in the mirror and say that I had any integrity anymore. And that is why I could no longer be a Liberal. So if that's what you want me to say, I'm sorry. I'm ashamed that you feel the way, that you can still wear that red with pride, but I'm sorry. Being a card-carrying Liberal is something I can no longer tell my children I am.
But why Conservative and then Green?
so
Why
can
jumping
I-
from
can
party
I,
to
Let's
party?
get back to basic
Sorry.
income. And Vic,
Yeah,
I actually wanted to ask you a question.
No, actually, can I just respond to
Sure.
this new denialism, which is apathetic, Mark. It's to the point where you are so apathetic, you infect people into doing nothing.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the answer that you gave.
What was the answer?
The answer was that we don't do anything because that's a provincial issue. Or that's a municipal issue.
No, but there are various different
I know
levels
that
of
there is.
responsibility. You have to work together. I'm not being apathetic.
Yes.
I'm saying you have to work together. And the whole point
You're
here
being
is to working
apathetic.
apathetic. Sorry, not empathetic. Apathetic.
You're not empathetic.
You have to work with other political, with other jurisdictions.
We
You have to
do,
it.
and we will.
But you're not saying that. You didn't say that
Yes,
in
I
what you said.
did.
You said is we
Did
will
I
bring
not
this
say
in.
that we will work with our provincial partners, our Indigenous partners, which you never do?
I'm just talking about specifically about universal basic income and the way that the NDP tries to conduct itself through its motions in the House of Commons. You would think that they don't think that there's another level of government that they have to work with based on those motions. And that's what I was referencing when I said that.
So we're just about out of time for this one, but Shelley, I want to give you the last word. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, very similar to Waji, I've been Liberal all my life, and I know you are too, Mark. And I voted Liberal. I voted Justin in. This isn't really your problem. You're probably very nice, and you're doing as best as you can. But there's somebody up on top, up higher than you, who's not doing a very good job. So is it really about you? No, not really. So it might look like we're picking on you, but we're not. We're picking on the person who's making these bad decisions that we're not okay with. So please hear me when I say we appreciate you, but it's not you. It's somebody else that we're fighting with. You happen to be here as a
And I
representative.
really appreciate you saying that, Shelley. I will just respond to that by saying that I'm extremely proud to be part of the party that this Prime Minister leads. We have had an incredible response throughout the pandemic. I think that Canadians knew that this government had its back all the time throughout the entire pandemic. We did, and as a result, our economy is growing back faster than the United States. Jobs are coming back faster than the United States, and we're, going to make sure that we're in a good position to continue to see that through, so that we can get back to where we were before the
And
pandemic.
thought they could get a majority, sneak it in before the fall.
I know we're,
Yeah.
I know
Basically
we're,
not have to
In,
consult
in the
their-
middle of a
I know we're a little over
pandemic,
time on this, but
People
I
are
actually want to get us
they
back
can
to
see
basic
right through
income.
that, and that's why they're trending down in the polls right
I wanna-
now.
I wanna
And
get
when
us
that
back to
ship
basic
goes down,
income.
we called it.
And I want to get us back to basic income. And I'm going to I have two questions, actually, one for Vic and one for Mark. And I want you to give really tight, succinct answers, because when I was thinking about this question, I did a little research on all of your policies. And Vic, I got to say, your commitment to basic income is really clear. In the latest householder you've distributed, it's there front and center. But it's buried on page 26 of your party's platform. What does that say about your party's commitment to basic income? 30 seconds.
right. So our party is actually committed to basic income. It is also committed to a whole bunch of other social programs. So it being buried in page 26, there is no shame in that, because it is in the platform. It isn't in the Liberals' platform.
Right, and I guess that's my question to Mark, is that Liberal parties at successive policy conventions have supported basic income guarantee enthusiastically, but yet their policy on basic income is silent. So how do you explain that?
Well, the way I explain it is that I'm telling you where my personal position is on it. I've never once stood here and said that the Liberal Party is going to move forward with basic income. What I've said is that I've personally supported a number of initiatives to further the discussion, to start pilot projects. I supported PEI's request to have a pilot project done there. I'm a seconder to Bill C-273, which was to develop a national framework around it. Listen, I am very much interested in seeing the data, in learning about how big can the programs of BIG and UBI can be better for people in our country, but I can't go into it blindly without knowing what the impacts really will be. You've heard from Shelley, who have said that CERB is actually a detriment to getting people to people having jobs. You've heard from Gary, who's saying that people aren't that businesses are being affected negatively by these programs. We don't want that to happen. If it's going to be successful, it has to be something that we fully, properly understand. So, I'm very supportive of the discussions, the strategies, developing strategies around it, but I won't blindly go into it saying that it has to be done.
Sure, and there was a pilot program, as you know, in the province of Ontario that was canceled, which would have given us great data.
Scrapped by Doug Ford's government.
So let me move on to the next
Sorry,
question,
if I
although
can respond to him.
Although,
There is
actually, you can respond the next time, because we got to move on.
Okay,
So
but-
this question's are going to start with Waji. And it's about the environment, and this was not planned, so this is right in your wheelhouse. So as we know, Canadians have experienced an incredibly sweltering summer. We saw fires in Lytton, BC, where the entire town was burnt down. We saw Northern Ontario experience massive fires, and snow blanketed even parts of the Arctic. And for goodness sakes, it was even raining in Greenland. The very bureaucratic sounding intergovernmental panel on climate change issued a report that said every part of the world is facing climate change, and bluntly put, it's humans that are the cause. So I could go on, but all this points to a crisis, and I know all of the people in this studio are familiar with this. But what specifically should we do to address this climate crisis? Wajid?
When I was 10 years old in 1985, I remember watching the CBC, and Hillary Brown was on the news midday, and she announced that there are 4 billion people on the planet. Fast forward to 2021, we have almost 8 billion people on the planet. So when we say that human beings are responsible for climate change, we are. Things become real for you at certain moments. I'd ask all my friends here when things became real for them. When I was in the Army, PTSD became real for me when one of my basic training instructors, one of the toughest people I know, was on the National talking about his ordeals, struggling to wake up and deal with life. Climate change became real for me, and I didn't talk to my wife about this, and I'm going to break it to her tonight on TV. We went for a honeymoon to Lake Louise in 2007. Beautiful time, had a great time, lots of great pictures, and every night I'd stare out at the window looking at that beautiful Victoria Glacier, thinking about the history, hundreds of thousands of years that it's there. And just 3 days ago on Facebook, a colleague of mine is in Lake Louise, and he's posting pictures, and I'm looking at these pictures asking myself, where has this glacier gone? And this climate change becomes real. How real do Kingstonians need it to be? Do you need like an extra meter of water to be, basically filling up Wolfe Island? Do you realize that our only hospital last summer had water dams up? We had to basically put sandbags up to prevent water from blockading the road and preventing ambulances from being able to access. What sort of changes do we need for people to basically say that we have a climate problem and that we need to do something about it in a factual manner? We can't just start taxing people. This isn't going to change behavior, as I've discussed already with taxation, healthcare, and smoking. Telling people scary stories doesn't necessarily change things either. What we need is we are at the tumor stage with respect to our environment right now. And when we're talking about cancer, when you deal with tumors, you either do surgery, chemotherapy, or radiation. And I'll tell you right now, slashing, burning, and poisoning people is the hard thing to do. We need a real solution, and we need it now.
Great, thank you very much. Shelley?
Thank you. Waji, you're my man, I'm telling you. So when it comes to cut, poisoning, or burning, yes, we are the tumors of the world. There are a lot of things that we can be doing differently. I don't know about how this is going to go, but Wolfe Island is really on par with their community, and I really think that we could maybe even learn from the small community right next door and the gardening. Sorry, Gary, I can't see you. And the gardening that they're doing, and the community garden, and everything that they're pulling together, and what they're doing to in their own communities for gardening and sharing, and those community gardens. And I know I've said that now 4 times. I'm new at this, so excuse me. I know Mark's had a lot of experience, and I listened to him over there, and he's just like, I'm like, wow. Anyway, when it comes to looking after our environment, I think these things right here, I forgot I'm being timed too. There's digital technology and the hustle and bustle of our society pushing us and driving us to be mad men and women, and every other gender, sorry. I want to be inclusive because I am. We just need to slow down, right? Because I know in my own backyard, I have these trees and these beautiful pieces of nature that are very healing. So when we talk about cut, poisoning, and burning, if we're out playing with the dirt and in with nature, we become less stressed. We can see life better. We can increase the diversity of our microbiome so that the government doesn't have to take a pharmaceutical approach to health, which was the wrong way that we dealt maybe with this pandemic, because lots of people have very well-versed immune systems that would have made it through. Locking people in, and I'm going to try and get to my platform, right, at some point. 10 seconds, I know. Anyway, there are lots of things that we can be doing, and if we just slowed down and actually breathed in a little bit, became one with the earth, we can do a lot more things for our environment instead of running around driving cars like crazy, trying to get from one place to the next and burning ourselves out.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Mark.
Thank you, Jonathan. Quite frankly, the environment is the most important issue to me. When I first ran for City Council in 2006, up until when I stand here before you now, it is the most critical issue. I have 3 children, one 17-year-old who's going into his last year of high school, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. I genuinely worry what this world will look like 50 years from now. It's the reason why my wife and I have been driving electric cars for 10 years. It's the reason why I put solar panels on my house. It's the reason why I continually get up in the House of Commons, including on the this particular the Interclimate Panel group that, with a very bureaucratic name, that brought forward this report. It's the reason why I spoke in the emergency debate in the House of Commons and had a very good dialogue with Elizabeth May over it. It is what we need to do. We need to move quickly. That's why I'm very proud that the Liberal Party has said that we will completely phase out fossil fuel subsidies that were around $5 billion in 2015. By 2023, they will be eliminated. It's the reason why we've said every vehicle sold in Canada by 2035 must be net zero. It's the reason why we're putting money into grants for people to be able to retrofit homes so that they can be more energy efficient, so they can reduce their costs. It's the reason why we continue to electrify fleets and helped the City of Kingston, for example, buy electric buses. We need to do more of this. We need to do it quicker. And quite frankly, there could not be a speed at which this did not move quick enough for me.
Well,
Great. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just wanted to give Mark a book. It's The Case for Basic Income, and the case is already made, Mark, scientifically. It's by Jonathan Swift and Elaine Power. So you might want to read it. Well, have you read it?
Written by Hugh Segal.
Exactly. So why don't you read it? Why don't you read it? And then come and let's talk about evidence-based based policies. Right.
It's
so,
a great book, but it doesn't get into data. We need data. That's my point.
Of course it goes into data. It is all about data.
Vic, you got 2 minutes.
Anyway, so one of the things in terms of a just recovery, we have an opportunity here. We know that there is going to be an injection into the economy. It doesn't matter what government there is. If we don't do that, there is going to be a recession. Now, if the Conservatives get in, what they're going to do is they're going to give a tax breaks to their rich colleagues. And in a failed attempt at trickle-down economics, we know that the Liberals are going to give tax breaks to their corporate friends. What the NDP wants to do is to take this opportunity to invest in green technology, electrified transportation, home fits, retrofits, and not oil companies or pipelines. We want to invest in gas, and we want to invest in helping oil and gas workers transition from a green, oil-based economy to a green economy. And this is what we are going to do. It is time. We have to do it now. We are running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment. I appreciate everyone's comments, because I think that we'd all say the environment is number one for all of us, and we all have families, and I'm a first-time grandparent. I have a grandson, and and I value your children as much as mine. And I think that we have a lot of work to do, and I'm really proud of my work as a counselor in the city. I'm really proud of this city of Kingston for being the first municipality to declare a climate change emergency, and the commitment to that. I can say to you that I've really grown and matured in my view of that, and in a sense of totally understanding it. I mean, I'm the recycling guru of my home, but I'm teaching my kids and all this stuff. But I guess I want to say is I really believe it begins at home, and I think that that's where a municipality can make a big difference. I don't know how many municipalities are out in Ontario, but I believe that the federal government can work with municipalities much closer, incentivize. I think we're seeing a lot of movement provincially as well. We're seeing, the producer responsibility. There's an awful lot of really good things that are happening that we can celebrate. And I love the community gardens. I'm a strong advocate for that. I love what the fact that our leader, one of his first announcements, Aaron O'Toole, has said that we're going to have a nation, when we establish power, and we're going to have a nation that will be sustainable. We're going to have a nation that will be self-sufficient in our food. That's something that's very, very important to me, and that I would like to be right at that level. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that I'm absolutely as committed. And I think all of our ideas are going to work together, not one, just one. And I can't wait to keep working on that file, because it's important to me, to my family, and for your families. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So we've heard a variety of perspectives, and I wanted to open it up to the floor. Prior to doing so, Shelley, I know you were just ready to talk about your party's platform, and I know viewers probably want to hear about that. So I'll give you an opportunity to address that.
It wasn't actually my party's platform that I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is where we stand right here, right now, today. And what I mean by that is, as we stand here today, we're living in a very different Canada. Do you not agree?
Yes.
This is not the Canada we grew up in. Do you not agree?
Absolutely.
Yep, for different reasons, we agree.
Yeah. Do you agree, Mark?
It's certainly changed in the last year and a half.
Sure has.
The pandemic has brought on a lot of challenges
Right.
for everyday Canadians. Absolutely.
We are not
We're
a
not.
social and just
That's
society.
right.
We're not in Kansas anymore, totally.
And what I want to say about that is every single day, I'm stepping up here and I have said I'm not a politician. I am a concerned Canadian. And I'll try not to get emotional because it's really nerve-wracking up here to begin with. And I don't have the wonderful experience that Mark has standing in a forum like this, being able to talk about things that are way up there in Ottawa. What I have here is real people, and every single day people are messaging me now that I'm running for the People's Party because of the state of our country. And I am not okay with what's going on.
Which part are you not okay with?
Which I'm going to get to, Mark. So you said you've done a good job in Kingston, okay? And you worry what this world will look like for your children, and that is the exact reason why I'm standing here, because I'm passionate about children. And when the pandemic started, for those who know about real health, for whatever reason, we took this odd, peculiar way of dealing with the pandemic, lockdowns and masking. Lockdowns and masking were never scientifically accurate for how to deal with a pandemic. Because when we look at viruses, we breathe in billions and trillions of viruses and bacteria every single day. It makes up 70% of our immune system. And yet the government, from their pharmaceutical narrative and their money-filled pockets, not about you, Mark, okay, just letting you know, chose to take a germ theory approach, which is cover everybody up and annihilate a bacteria or a virus. When you cover everybody up, you are restricting our ability to have a full-blown immune system, right? What, Vic? Do you know what we're talking about?
Please don't include me in this. I'm an epidemiologist and I fear your party.
Do you not support the medical advice that we get from our Chief Medical Officer of Health?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Because it's not a functional view of health. It's focused on a pharmaceutical view.
Well,
everybody needs to be vaccinated. People are being threatened right now by our leader. Our leader is saying, if you don't get vaccinated, there will be consequences, like he's my parent telling me what to do.
But Dr.
And
Karen-
he's also
Dr.
picking
Karen
and
Moore-
choosing which Canadians he likes and doesn't like.
Dr. Kieran Moore is not coming from a
I'm not worried about Dr. Kieran
but he's
Moore,
the one
who's
that-
also in a public health position, indoctrinated in a medical system that is pharmaceutical funded.
But
So
I believe him.
I
Can
got to
we
jump
get-
in here,
yeah.
and I know several people want to jump in, but I want to spend time on the last question, but
Sorry,
I do
I just-
feel
can we-
obligated to correct something here because, like several people here, I'm an academic as well, and knowledge comes from peer-reviewed scientific
Yes.
journals. And while one could make an argument about the role of the pharmaceutical industry in that, peer review and knowledge is something entirely different. So I think for the sake of people listening and watching at home, we need to have a clear understanding that this is actually rational policy making. We can disagree on implementation, but the
about all the-
course of treatment is based on science, which is real.
And
So
the
let me just
censorship of
move
all
on
the
to the
doctors
last
across
question.
Sorry, can
Canada.
I just talk about science and the environment, because that's the question I think you asked. There's something called a new denialism, and Mark, you're the classic. You know, they believe in the science, but they're so apathetic that they infect our collective psyche in absolutely doing nothing. Investing in pipelines is not a friendly environmental move.
Jonathan, this is about science, but if I could just bridge the two. Being a clinician and having thousands of patients, talking to people of all ages, children, adults, the elderly. Part of the problem here, this isn't just about science. This is about leadership, okay? It's about leadership. It's about how messages are communicated, all right? If people lose trust and confidence in public health, and by this, I'm talking about Dr. Theresa Tam. Last January, don't wear a mask. Okay, all of a sudden, wear a mask. No groups of 200. Okay, no, 100. No, 50. If I was your doctor and I told you I was giving you conflicting information, would you have trust and confidence in me? Then we go out and say that the vaccine is safe. The vaccine is safe. But when you have Dr. Supriya Sharma going on national TV, and I was watching the Stanley Cup playoffs with 3 of my medical school colleagues, right, enjoying the game, and she comes out and says, no shortcuts were taken. All 3 of us jumped out and said, of course shortcuts were taken. What happened to the phase 2 and 3 clinical trial? The problem is, all you had to do was go out there from a leadership perspective and tell the public, we're dealing with a novel health situation. Yes, we had to accelerate the development of these things. Yes, they are safe. Yes, there may be some complications, but the risks are outweighed by the benefits.
So-
had there been a leadership position taken, we wouldn't be having these
think the
debates.
lead-
So,
People
So-
push
so
back
one
vaccination.
of, one of
As
the things.
As the moderator's
sorry.
debate, I would love to continue this conversation, trust me. But we're going to move on to the final
Okay.
question. And if you want to return to this in your concluding statements, I want to encourage the candidates to do so. So, Shelley, you're going to begin the answer to the final question, and it's around Indigenous politics and reconciliation. So here in Kingston, we of course had this very intense conversation about reconciliation through the Johnny MacDonald statue. And one of the things that conversation told me is that folks are in favor of reconciliation until they're not. And they really don't understand what that means or what it takes to truly accommodate and reconcile with our original First Nations peoples. So my question to all of the candidates, starting with Shelley, is what specific actions would your party take towards reconciliation?
I don't know what Maxime's choice on this is, but I know, having worked with many Aboriginal people, you know, writing my thesis on Aboriginal youth when I was in university had something to do with the Aboriginal peoples, yes, but you know what, we can learn a lot from them. Right now, I think we've been giving lots of money and different things, but is that really hitting what they need from us? I don't know if that is. What I've heard is there's a lot of cultural pieces that they've lost that need to join us. And I know that I've worked with many Aboriginal people, and I have learned a lot from them on how they look after their youth. And they just have this amazing way of parenting that if you knew some of the inner workings of what they do, it's the most beautiful thing with attachment and attunement to their children. And I think if we allowed them to have a voice, I don't feel like they really have a voice. I feel like they have this voice, but people keep going, here's some money, stay quiet. I don't know, maybe that's my perception. I don't know, that's just pieces that I've heard and people have shared with me. How would my party? I don't know, because again, at Maxime, right, I'm here in Kingston, and I know that, you know, having worked in Charlotte Lake with some Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal people and families, and even in like Deseronto and the Mohawk territory and whatnot, as well as I've been on some task forces as well. There's a lot of things we can do, and I'm an inclusive person. So I'm happy to include them in my life as well.
Great, thank you very much. Mark.
Thanks, Jonathan. I would say that, you know, the relationship with Indigenous communities throughout Canada is one that's going to take a long time to come to resolution. It was a long time in the making to get you know, several hundred years. It's going to be something that my kids and their kids, quite frankly, will be dealing with, and rightfully so. We have, through our country over the last several hundred years, put in systemic barriers in place that have made it made the circumstances for Indigenous peoples so much more difficult. I will say that of the calls to action that came out in 2010, just before 2010, about 76 of them were for the federal government, of which 80% have either been completed or are well underway. There's a number of other initiatives that have been brought before the House, such as implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, continuing to build infrastructure, building separate school systems for Indigenous peoples that they can run and maintain and contribute towards. And I agree with Shelley, there are many different Indigenous communities throughout Canada. In order to make sure that we properly move forward, it's going to have to be something that's done in collaboration, working with and giving and allowing the infrastructure to be built, developed, monitored, and seen through by Indigenous peoples.
Great, thank you very much.
So Mark, it's interesting you said the word collaboration. When you spend billions of dollars, your party spends billions of dollars suing Indigenous people. When your party promised to have drinking water by March 2021, and another promise that your party has broken. Yeah. So when Mark said that they implemented call for action 80%, most of those, if not all of them, are symbolic. And if symbolism is all you have failed as a government. So, for example, you spent billions of dollars suing Indigenous people over a human right, delivery of good water. You lost that lawsuit and had to pay $1.2 billion, which would have, by my calculations, solved the water problem. Again, Mark, it is an apathy. Because it's complex, we're not going to do it. How is that governing? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gary.
Thank you very much. And again, I appreciate all the comments around this table here. And as Waji said, I really think what we have is a crisis of leadership at the top of our country. And any other option, if Justin Trudeau stays Prime Minister, it will be more of the same, more economic decline and unemployment, more reckless spending, more fiscal waste and incompetence, and more entitlement and corruption, more policies that favor the elites and insiders. And as Vic has already said, it's absolutely astounding that we have a government that was unable to solve the water crisis with Indigenous people. And one of the most amazing parts of being a city councillor has been to be part of Indigenous circles. And it has changed me on the inside. Also a very difficult night for the vote for the statue. So I've been in the mix of many real life things. I don't understand how we can possibly have these kind of things and not have water. If I were to have the privilege of serving Kingston and the Islands in Ottawa, I will be at that table first. I have a lot of tables to be at, don't I? But I will be. I will be with so much passion to fix that because I believe in restorative conversation. And I think probably we all do, but I believe in it that really will bring change and respect. And we've had that opportunity. We had a traveling circle come through in Kingston here with an Indigenous group, and it was a powerful time. We had 2 nights with them as City Council, and for me it was life-giving. And I really would like to say that to our viewers, that there's nothing to fear in this restorative conversation. It's going to make us better people and better citizens and a better country. And I want to be part of that conversation. But I know that right now we cannot keep this same government in power, and we must make a change now. And that's why we're here. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Waji.
Thank you, Jonathan. As I stated in my opening remarks, in order to have truth and reconciliation, we need the real truth for reconciliation. And part of this is acknowledging that the government had a system that allowed pedophiles to get away with raping children in an institution that was run by government. and this is wrong. I said pedophiles. I should have said alleged pedophiles because I believe in our justice system. But those criminals, alleged criminals, should be investigated. A thorough investigation should be done. 3,000 kids died in the residential school system that we know of. An investigation should be done. And should there be enough evidence to lay charges, charges should be laid. And those people should be dealt with in the criminal justice system if found guilty, and show how Canadians treat child molesters, okay? The Liberal government appealing a 2019 Human Rights Tribunal, which ordered $40,000 to be paid out to each kid taken from their homes and to be put into a residential school system. And here's a quotation from the Prime Minister. Should someone who went to a day school for a few months or a year be compensated to the exact same amount as someone who was in a traumatic situation over many, many years where they were taken from their families and had a very, very different experience? Right now, the Human Rights Tribunal says that everyone should get the exact same amount. We don't know that that's entirely fair. So how many times does a child have to be raped in order to make them relevant? Once, twice, 10 times, every day until you decide to commit suicide? These are the hard realities that we're talking about. The Indigenous require real truth for real reconciliation. Dancing around things and blaming certain aspects of the government is no way to get to this. If you've ever been the victim of a crime, do you like it when people don't offer you a sincere apology? And that is how the Indigenous would feel.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have just a few minutes for an interaction before we go to final statements. So Mark.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there. I found it to be very alarming that Vic would suggest that all of what we've done has been lip service. I would encourage him to consult with Indigenous communities as to whether or not passing the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is lip service. I would encourage him to talk to Indigenous communities where the government has built and refurbished 200 schools to be managed by Indigenous communities. I would encourage him to look at the over $4 billion that has been spent on clean drinking water and whether or not that is lip service. And to the issue of clean drinking water, I think it's important to point out that 68%, these are the facts, data you can get on the Government of Canada's website, 68% of the boil water advisories have been lifted, 9.4% the project constructions are complete and we're just waiting for the advisory to be lifted, 20% the projects are under construction, 1.3% of the projects are to lift the drinking water advisories are in the design phase, and another 1.3% are in the feasibility study phase. The vast majority of work as it relates to clean drinking water throughout Canada has either been complete or is well underway.
So we've got about 30 seconds.
30
so
seconds.
Vic, go ahead.
So I'll give you an example of Mark's symbolism. Just after the election, or before the election was called, he sent an email around saying how proud he was that new citizens, their oath include honoring Indigenous land claims. How is that going to make the Indigenous people, how is that going to make quality of life better for them? Maybe you should take that oath, Mark, instead of a new citizen. I can imagine my dad in 1977 coming over from Guyana, taking an oath like that and saying, I'm not quite sure what that means.
In all the discussions we had in the House of Commons, not one NDP member was critical of this. They were all extremely supportive of it because it's when new citizens come here, they will be taking an oath that recognizes that these lands originally belonged to Indigenous peoples,
Yeah,
and that they are now becoming a part of that. It's an issue of being holistic. But notwithstanding that comment, look at all the other stuff that I read off that we are actually doing. You want physical bricks and mortar?
Mark,
what about the other stuff that I mentioned? There's lots in there.
Here. So one of the things that you said is that you work with Indigenous people. I have to admit that I talk to Indigenous people, and that is the last thing that they would say about your government. They are ignored.
On that note, as much as I would like to continue this conversation, we are running out of time. So we're going to go to final statements, and I want to encourage the candidates to include some of the things that they didn't have an opportunity to speak about in tonight's debate, and we will continue with the order we've done. So Mark, I'll give you the first 2 minutes and we'll go around as we did before.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you to my fellow candidates. It's always great to have discussions with you, to be part of this, and thank you to the viewers for watching today. It's been an honor and a privilege to represent you over the last 6 years. I think that I've been able to demonstrate that I can get things done, whether it's getting funding for the third crossing of the Cataraqui River, or whether it's securing money for affordable housing, as we've done a number of times here in Kingston, and there's so much more work that remains to be done. So with that, I'm asking on September the 20th for your vote so that I can continue to represent you in Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you. Vic?
The NDP and I are going to represent the people of Kingston and the islands, not the elites, and certainly not big business. We will fight for small business to be equal, to have equal footing so that they can compete with those that are not paying taxes and are not able to hire major accountants to actually pay no taxes. One of the things that we want to do is talk about housing. We, for example, with the NDP, we will provide 500,000 green affordable housing units. We will ensure that there is a 30-year insured mortgage through the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. But where we separate those policies is that if you want to do something about homelessness, we have to invest in other social programs like mental health and addiction. We have to invest in pharmacare, childcare. We have to invest in women's rights because 2 out of every 5 women that leave an abusive relationship end up homeless. And we can solve that problem through NDP policies such as a guaranteed livable income. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gary?
Thank you very much. If Kingston and the Islands elects a Liberal or NDP or Green Party and Justin Trudeau stays Prime Minister, it will mean more of the same. It will mean more economic decline and unemployment. It will mean more reckless spending. It will mean fiscal waste and incompetence, more entitlement and corruption, and more policies that favor the elites and insiders. And we have now stated as Canada's Conservatives have a detailed plan to put Canada's fiscal house in order and protect social services. The Conservative plan to secure Canada's finances will include adopting a responsible and a measured approach to balancing the budget over the next decade, rein in deficits to address inflation and the rising costs of necessities like groceries and gas, wind down emergency pandemic supports in a responsible and a compassionate way as the recovery gets underway. We'll get back to a robust economic growth with Canada's recovery plan, a plan to grow the economy. Canadians have a critical choice in the coming election to continue down the path of failure and soaring debt with the Liberals and the NDP, or a Conservative government that will build a stronger Canada with greater jobs and a rising wages. As a Canada where every sector of the economy can share in the success of our great nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Waji?
Thank you, Jonathan. As I mentioned, the Green Party is the only party that's coming to you with a new way of doing things. We represent honesty, integrity. Canada deserves to not fail. We're the only party that's coming to you with an economic plan that's going to create jobs that are going to be green, all-inclusive for all people in society, and focusing on made in Canada to increase our GDP and improve the outcomes for Canadians. From a healthcare perspective, we want to maintain a comprehensive healthcare system that respects every aspect of the Canada Health Act. From a social perspective, the government announced $40 billion of spending over 10 years. That breaks down to $4 billion a year at 200,000 units. Those 20,000 homes, where are they, right? We're the only party that's going to go out there and actually focus on creating real affordable housing and address the cost of living issues that our society faces. With respect to culture, our Indigenous people had their history buried. We need to provide real truth for reconciliation. And with respect to the environment, Jonathan, there's no party out there. These guys all just take something, paint it green, call it a tax or pricing as the Liberals call it, and say it's an environmental action plan. No party has fought for the environment as hard as the Green Party has since its inception. So if all of these ideas sound good to you, come join me at 1057 Midland Avenue at our campaign office. Pick up a campaign sign, grab a post, come volunteer for us, make a donation, but most importantly, on September 20th, 2021, vote for Dr. Waji Khan to be the Member of Parliament for Kingston and the Islands. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And last word to you, Shelley.
First of all, thank you for having me. Thanks for putting up with my first debate. Like I said, I'm not a politician. I'm not as well versed as some of you are, but I did learn a lot from all of you, and I appreciate your passion. I also just quickly wanted to say there was a March 2021 study that came out on the microbiome and the diversity of those people with COVID. And those that did struggle with COVID had lack of diversity, and they are also the ones that suffered with the long haul. And that just came out in March from a microbiologist. So, and anyway, if I can share that later if you're interested. But yes, I do follow the science as well. I just want to say, unfortunately, I didn't get to talk about what's really been on my mind and the reason why I stood up to be a politician. And it basically is that this is not my Canada, not what I know it to be. And I don't want to be here, but yes, I am, because I need to stand up and somebody needs to represent the Canadians, whether they're in Kingston or whether they're around Canada. Every day right now, we have all these concerns that people are stressed, and we used to have sorry, how much was that? 1 minute? We lived in a country that was inclusive and appreciated everybody and their diverse background, their opinions and everything. And within a matter of 1 year, that's gone. It's just wiped away. And the hate that's out there right now is not okay. And people are struggling. Like, we're the only party that stands for no more lockdowns, freedom of censorship, because I know a whole bunch of doctors that are being censored. But we are lacking in our pillars of health for a functioning society. Our healthcare is damaged, our business and economy is damaged, our children and our livelihoods and quality of life have been damaged. And when September 20th comes, this is not our typical election, and I'm looking to everybody around the room. There's only one party that can fix this and get us back on track, because post-pandemic is probably going to continue to be pandemic by the way I see it, and the way that all these people are being forced against their values and their beliefs and being chosen by somebody up top, picking and choosing which Canadians he likes. And that's not okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Shelley. Well, let me just wrap things up by thanking all of you. All candidates debates are one of the few opportunities in an election where you can hear all of the candidates and compare their positions on the issues. And I think in the last 90 minutes, we've touched on a variety of issues, and you've heard a real great discussion about the differences and similarities on reconciliation, income security, taxation policy, etc. The decision on September 20th, or if you vote in advance polls or early by mail, is really an important one. And I hope that this debate and the candidates' contributions here have helped in your decision and encouraged you to seek more information. I wanted to thank Your TV for hosting this debate, and I wanted to thank the sponsor, the Kingston Action Group for Basic Income Guarantee, especially Jamie Swift and Bill Cooper for all their work, and Steve Heron at Your TV. I really appreciate their help in making this. Most importantly, I want to thank the 5 candidates. I want to thank them for putting their names forward and for being part of this democratic process, which is so important. As you've heard from Shelley, it's not an easy job standing up here being a candidate, although I think every candidate did an outstanding job. And I think we all owe them a debt of gratitude. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you vote on September 20th. I'm Jonathan Rose. Have a good day. Bye-bye.